Welcome to Investors Coffee Shop. We're your host, Brian Harte.
Juanita Jacaran.
I have been working in the financial industry for over 17 years. I started in New York City and in 2010 expanded my business to Alexandria, Virginia.
I have 3 years of experience in the financial industry. I have written articles that has been published on MarketWatch, Associate Press, Morningstar, and many more.
Investors Coffee Shop is for people who want to learn more about investing, make better decisions, create new streams of income.
Each episode, we will discuss investing in real estate, stocks, bonds, art, antiques, wine, collectibles, and anything that may generate a profit.
Join us at Investors Coffee Shop. Welcome back to episode 5 of Investors Coffee Shop. I'm Brian Harte, your host. And today we're going to be discussing Magic the Gathering. This is a popular game you may not be aware of. It's a tabletop digital card game created by Richard Garfield. Wizards of the Coast released it in 1993, and there are currently over 100 different sets you can play. They release 4 or more per year. The game was considered the first in the industry, then was followed by games like Pokemon and others. The company generates over $500 million a year in sales, with an average cost of $20 for a starter deck and $250 for a competitive deck. People from all over the world compete, and some have been well known in the industry, such as Paulo Rosa, Gabriel Nazet, Seth Manfield, and many, many others. So why would a card game be considered an investment or have the potential to make me money or you money, you ask? Well, we have 2 special guests with me today, Adam Eltarhoni and Mike Liu, who will help answer these and many more. Before we start, I'd like to tell you a quick story. Back in 2020 on Antique Roadshow, there was a woman who had inherited these cards from her husband and took them to the show and found out that the entire collection she had was a beta collection from 1993. She thought there's no way these things could possibly be worth anything. To her surprise, they were appraised at $100,000. That's a lot of money for just a few cards. And that was just the 9 main power play cards in that industry. Adam and Mike, can you explain the game, how both of you got involved in the game, and what makes this special to you guys?
Thank you, Brian. The thing about Magic the Gathering is it's a collectible card game, as you mentioned, and what you can do is you can just pick your cards you want in your deck, make a deck, and then find someone else to play against. And it could be one person, it could be multiple people. I think the best thing about this game is it's very portable. So in addition to, of course, the digital version of the game, the paper version of the game allows people to just find random players, find anyone else, bring their cards with them, and play a game. And the game is very unique in the sense that it's different from a traditional game like chess, in the sense that there's a little bit of randomness to it. You draw your 7 cards, and then you don't know what's on your library, which is your deck of cards, and you draw a card, and it could be anything. So it allows that randomness to kind of play into the fact that even if you're the best player, you may not always win just because someone might draw better than you or have kind of a different outcome than you. And so I got into it when I was actually in, I want to say, middle school or high school, and it was a field day, like last day of the school year, annual day, and people are signing yearbooks and whatnot, and we just went over to some friends, and they were playing this game, Magic the Gathering, and so I was aware of it because I collected comic books at the time, but I didn't know much about it, and I said, okay, I'll give it a little shot. I played one game, and I was hooked, and then over the summer, I just kept buying more and more packs and cards, and by then, my other friends moved on from it, but I was set on it. That's what got me into it.
For me, playing Magic started in elementary school. My age difference here is about that lines up right, but I remember coming to school, recess came around, and a bunch of kids had these cards. And I was like, what is this? It looked like you're having a good time. What's going on? And they showed me a few Magic cards. They showed me, oh, look at this cool creature. It's like a big 10-10 Leviathan. It's so big, you can't beat this. I was like, that's cool. I want to play this game, right? And so, that sort of stuck with me. I bought cards as a kid. I still got that nostalgia about it. I stopped playing, after elementary school, middle school, high school. College came around. I dabbled in a little bit. It came up as a joke at work one day where someone was like, oh, I used to play Magic. I was like, oh, I used to play Magic. Let's play it again. And ever since I became an adult with disposable income, I can't stop spending my money on it. But no, it's been great. The best part of the game is, it's fun. It's a strategic game, right? There's a lot of different ways you can play it. People like to say that you can express the way that you think through the way that you play the game. But for me, it's also just about meeting the people. I mean, I've met Adam, how long ago has it been? Like
At least 5 years,
at least 5 years. We've been very good friends since we met playing this game. And it's been great. I've made a lot of lifelong friends through the game.
So not only can you make money in the cards itself, you're also making new friendships to go with it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. There's a lot of money to be made in the game,
But there's still that joy of when you open a pack of cards that might be $4 and you open a $20 card. Even though that's not a lot, it's still fun because you made money off of something that you're going to play with anyway. And I guess that's kind of where it like detracts itself from baseball cards and other collectibles is at the end of the day, no matter what, if these cards end up not being worth anything, you still have a game that you can play forever. You can always find people to play with and you always have friends to play with. So the collectability of it is just the bonus that has obviously become very popular over the years.
Why do you, Mike, think the game became so popular?
You know, it's funny because compared to other card games like Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh, there's nothing that ties Magic to pop culture other than the card game itself. Why did it stay around? I think that every time I talk to someone about playing Magic, it's the same conversation. It's like, I used to play this when I was in elementary school, middle school. This is still around. Let me check it out, right? And again, it's the nostalgia about the cards itself. It's just so interesting that the game is so compelling that it never needed a TV show or never needed a video game. It didn't need a movie. It was just able to continue on and keep evolving. That's the other thing that Wizards of the Coast have been pretty good about is sort of keeping up and understanding how people like to play the game and being able to adapt to that.
Pokemon, which blew up, but has hundreds of TV shows. Other avenues have movies and everything else, but Magic, this is strictly just based off of gameplay and nostalgia. And anything that involves nostalgia, people are going to pay a pretty big penny for to bring back their youth. I'm 45 years old, and when the game came out, I was in high school. Seeing people play all the time, if I saw those cards again, it hits me in the face like, oh my God, I need those cards again. I'll go to a Comic-Con convention or whatever it may be and be like, I remember my brother using those, and I need those cards right now. So what do you want? Would you agree with that? Is that part of the value of Magic?
Yeah, I definitely think so. Like you said, the nostalgia is great. And I think, especially recently with the pandemic, people were getting back to the things that they remembered as their childhood or when they could go outside. And that really was leveraged into games such as Magic, where people wanted to play that. And I've actually met a lot of people that I host some friends over every week to play Magic. And a lot of them will come back into it and they said, I just started playing a year or two ago because pandemic happened, I needed something to play, and I started playing it online and I really liked it, so I wanted to play it in paper version, and I'm coming here to play. Brings back that kind of the youthful part where this was a fun thing that you may have never gotten into. Once you saw it again, you're like, okay, I'm going to learn about it because now I'm older, I have the time, and I can actually commit to this.
And I can understand the rules correctly.
Yeah, exactly.
With the different colors in Magic the Gathering, is there any certain colors that are worth more than the others or more desirable or more collectible, or does it have no meaning and value?
You know, off the top, no, there's no real tie to a value to a color. However, all the different colors have different characteristics on how they interact with the game and how they interact with other colors. And some different play styles are just more popular than others, but it doesn't necessarily translate to being like big investment opportunities, let's say.
They each have their own philosophy, like Mike said, and they, green is the big creatures, red is the aggressive and, spells that deal damage and, burn things out, white's kind of the healing color. So each color has their own little philosophy and nothing really played into that. But we'll say, historically blue, which is the color that lets you draw more cards. And as people have learned in Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh, drawing cards is very valuable to the game. The early days of Magic, drawing cards were a lot easier than they were for blue, which made it more desirable. Things have balanced itself out a little bit more. So at this moment, no one color is like really more powerful. But you'll see historically, like with the Power 9 cards, and for example, there's a lot of blue cards in that because at the time, when they were creating the game, they just didn't realize the power level that they were giving the color.
So what is the Power 9 cards? Why are those so rare and expensive?
The Power 9 is a list of 9 cards, and they include mostly 0 mana spells. And by 0 mana, I mean, so in Magic, most of what you play is a spell that will cost something. And it could be 1 to, up to 10, 15, 20, whatever it costs. And you have to use a special card called a land to play it. And so this The 0 mana spells meant you can play them for free, and they gave you an ability that you didn't have to pay anything for. Early on, players realized that if you wanted to get an advantage, you can play all these spells and play a big creature, maybe a dragon, on your first or second turn while your opponent's still playing their first or 2 lands, and they're not going to be able to deal with that. So those cards, known as the Moxes and Black Lotus, were part of the Power 9. And then in addition to that, there was a few blue spells included. One allowed you to take an extra turn for just 2 mana, so the cost of 2. One allowed you to draw 3 cards for just 1 mana. And I think there's another one in there, Time Twister. And the last one was another powerful blue spell that allowed you to shuffle your library and draw 7 cards. So again, back to the card draw. So the Power 9 was called that for a certain reason, but they were really the original cards that every player knew you had to put in your deck if you were ever going to win any competitive Magic game. And the game was still early on in the early days, but it was getting to a point where they were starting up competitive events and people were actually taking this seriously. And so those cards became highly desirable and very collectible. And those, of course, are going to be your most expensive cards in the game.
And if I'm correct, they stopped printing those in 1994 because of that. Those cards go for an obscene amount of money. And we're not just talking about $1,000 or $100 for a card that you paid $4 for a pack. The Black Lotus, as of April this year alone, sold for over $500,000 on the open market. So that means if you paid $4 for a pack back in 1993, or maybe less than that, because obviously it was cheaper back then, your return of investment is much bigger nowadays today. That going on with the Power 9, why, in your opinion, were they taken off the market to where they couldn't be used in competitive? And are they easy to find? And are they worth still buying today at these high prices?
The first part of that question is they ultimately ended up on this list of cards called the reserve list. The reserve list is a set of cards that were listed by Wizards of the Coast. It was sort of like a promise to never reprint these cards functionally to increase the collectability of these cards. Power 9 was the most obvious thing to include on there just because they were too powerful for the game. Actually, most of the ways that you can play Magic, those Power 9 cards are banned because they're just so powerful. The rest of the reserve list, questionable on the power level, but again, just Wizards promised to make the card game more collectible, putting the collectability back in the game.
And I want to take it a step back, actually. So the first few Magic sets, they had Alpha, they had Beta, and they had Unlimited. And then these are what they call the core sets. But really what mattered is they also decided that the Power 9 was too powerful to even reprint. So the core sets were reprint sets. It's the same cards in the first few sets. And then in the fourth set, or the revised, as they call it, that was where they cut out the Power 9 because they realized by then, and this was probably 94, that it was just too powerful and there was no fun in the game if all these powerful cards existed. So they cut them out for that. So that's one of the kind of early stages of the creators of the game realizing that they wanted this game to be sustainable. So they needed to take out these powerful cards. So even before the reserve list, these cards weren't in print anymore, which increased the desirability. And like Mike said, you can't even play them in most formats, but it goes back to the nostalgia. These were the collectible pieces. These were the ones that people wanted, you grew up learning about, and there's the desire there.
So the money is more in, you can't use this card. It's just, I have this card, when it comes down to it. But in your opinion, let's say, Mike, would you buy the Black Lotus now at $250,000, $500,000? The price that it's going?
If I had that kind of money ready to just throw at something, yeah, why not? I mean, it's not to say that's the best investment opportunity for you today, but there's not going to be any more of it, and the game's only been getting more popular. So it seems like it could only go up, but don't quote me on that.
Well, I think the Black Lotus, there was 1,100 cards that were actually printed. That was it. So it's a small supply. And like anything in demand, when you have small supply, the price goes all the way up in value. And then as Magic got more popular throughout the years, they produced more and more cards, which became not as valuable as $500,000, obviously. So that goes to 2021. We've gone through the COVID pandemic. People are stuck at home. They were coming back. They started playing more games like Pokemon, they were investing more in comic books. People were just bored, stuck at home. And Magic the Gathering also grew because the prices of Magic the Gathering have doubled in the last 3 years. And notably in 2021, we had the Terror of the Peaks, Ugin, Chromatic Ori, Grim Tutor. All these have become very collectible. Can you tell us why those are collectible when they just came out last year?
If you look at the price charts for these, and there are different places where you can look at the price history of these cards, they'll fluctuate a lot. Initially, they'll come out pretty hot, and then they'll settle down, and it'll find its home in terms of a price later. I think for those cards specifically, the pandemic played into those prices because there was some uncertainty about people's income, and a lot of people cut back initially on what they did and didn't want to spend money on, and Magic was one of the first things. So there's definitely a set of cards out there that were initially released during the pandemic that are going to be more scarce than cards that are being printed right now because they've sort of increased the production and people have been spending more money. So I'd say for the prices for those cards, it could be just supply. It's just a supply side thing. But it's not to say that they're not playable cards. Those cards that you listed are highly desirable to put into people's decks and to play. So that's the other part of it too.
Between the price tag of $5 to $10, what do you think would be the top cards to buy now that you, and obviously we don't have a crystal ball and this market is highly speculative, but in your opinion, if you had say $5 or $10 and you want to throw out it, what cards would you recommend buying now you think would double, triple, quadruple in the future?
First of all, specific cards, I'll name a few, and Mike will probably add a few more to this list, but I'll go in with kind of general cards. When you're looking at cards, look at the different formats they're played in, how popular they are. There's a lot of websites that tell you how often a card is played, where they're located, and things like that. So those are good indicators of, is a card going to be popular or not? Another, to get into specifics, is that there's these set of lands from a new set called Streets of New Capenna, and they come into play tap, but they count as 3 different colors, so you can tap it for one of 3 colors. And they have a lot of features to them, and they all have different names, but just, some people call them the Triome lands because it fits a little cycle of cards. What I'm trying to say is those cards are very popular. They go in a lot of formats. They go in a lot of decks. You can probably get them around $5 right now. Some of them maybe a little more, but between the $5 to $10 range. And those, I would say, are very safe bets because they're always in demand, and the way the company does is they probably will not reprint those cards for a little while, so you're safe for at least maybe a few years. Of course, things could change, but you're safe from them being reprinted and them losing values. I would recommend those off the top of my head.
My quick answer is there is no safe card to spend $5 to $10 on in Magic. If you're someone like Adam and myself, we are obsessively checking Magic card prices. We are also very up to date on getting news about reprints, new sets coming out, what's coming, what's rumored to come out. Very specific sets that are dedicated to reprinting cards that makes it a little bit more unsafe for you to throw money at cards. But if you're able to spend the time and to check out prices on a regular basis, yeah, the Triome lands, Tricycle lands, whatever you want to call them, are great. Other safe places to put $5 to $10 are there are these secret layers. Magic the Gathering releases these very small boxes, and the boxes range around like $30 to $40 depending on if they're foil or non-foil, and can go up for different charitable causes. When those sets are actually in the hands of the buyers, a lot of people will sell off the individual cards in them. And so there are always some cheaper cards within the box than others that are worth picking up because there's usually one hot card in that secret layer, right? And everyone's going to pay 25 to 30, whatever the value of the box is, they'll almost spend that money on that one card. But there are always other cards in those boxes to take a look at that you buy today and they could triple, quadruple within, 2-3 years.
So where do you guys go to find the information to invest in these things?
Yeah, definitely. So there's a few websites, and Mike will probably go into a little more details, but the main ones are TCG Player. This is the biggest marketplace, maybe outside of eBay. I don't know what their TCG sales are, but TCG Player focuses primarily a lot on Magic the Gathering and a few other games, and that's where you can see everyone list their price, and they can buy and sell cards. You can literally go on there right now, set up an account, post your cards and sell them and ship them off. That's the biggest marketplace, and that gives you an insight to what market trends are looking like. They do a little historical data to show you where things are going. There's a few other websites, MTG Goldfish is the big one that gives you, again, historical data of cards, and it also shows you what the top decks are, so you can kind of get some insights there, see what's going on. MTG Stocks. Facebook groups, things like that. The primary place that I buy and sell is TCG Player and then eBay. And eBay is good because sometimes you get the customers that aren't familiar with TCG Player. They'll go on there, and everyone knows eBay. eBay's been around 20, 30 years or 20 years. But yeah, and so people will know to go on eBay to buy the card they need, and you can sell there. So those are the big ones I use for buying and selling. I will also add, for any European listeners, Card Market is basically like the TCG Player of Europe. And then Haruya is the Japanese version of TCG Player. So they're the big markets as well.
I think, I'll distinguish between Haruya and the others, and it's because when you buy a card on TCG Player or Card Market, it's like individuals like you and I selling through it. Haruya is just a very large shop in Japan. There are other large shops in the US too, Card Kingdom and Star City Games. Channel Fireball just got bought out by TCG Player, which is, could probably do a whole other topic on it. But in terms of other resources, it's just a matter of trying to pick up what cards are being played. And there are always surprises. EDH Rec is another good one, because EDH is the most popular way to play Magic right now. And people who care enough to, log their decks are logging it through EDH Rec. And so they have a lot of statistics on there about what cards are popular, what cards go well with other cards. So it gives you different ways to do your research. But articles from these stores, even though they're primarily vendors, but Star City Games, Channel Fireball, they were always throwing out articles about, things to look out for, and also trends in how cards are being played too. So those are all good resources.
What is TCG and Star City Games and the ones you mentioned for the people who don't know?
TCG Player, think of it as the eBay for collectible card games. So that's all you really need to know. You can list your card. They automatically have the photos of every card in their database, so you don't have to upload a photo like an eBay. And you can buy and sell, and you have you get a rating. You can get rated after each purchase, rated after each sale. So that's the basic core of what TCG Player is, just the eBay for collectible card games. Star City and Card Kingdom, those are massive vendors, and what they do is they'll go in and they buy tons of product, and then they'll list the singles, they'll list the sealed product. The benefit of using one of those is, and this is, TCG, it does have some safeguards too, but if you're buying an old card, like I probably wouldn't buy a Power 9 card from TCG, I would buy it from Card Kingdom or Star City, because they're a trusted vendor. You know that they're not going to have a card that may be counterfeited or damaged and misrepresented. You do pay a little more with the big vendors, but you also get that safety knowing that they will have the authentic cards.
How do you watch out for counterfeited cards? Because as these cards are going for $20, $100, $1,000, how can you spot a counterfeit?
There are lots of articles out there that talk about things to look out for in a counterfeit card. It's mostly comes down to the inking on the prints. You'll see a lot of Magic vendors with jewel loops, the little thing that people look at diamonds with. They'll use to look on back of cardboard cards. But they're looking at very specific parts of the card that are known to have variances in the counterfeit. There's a green dot test. If you Google that, there are tons of articles and videos that'll tell you what to look for in the green dot test. There are some more strange tests, like the bend test, which sounds like terrifying when you're talking about Power 9. There's there's a flexibility to the cards. People are very familiar with it. Some people, I've been told, they can feel a counterfeit, right? Just looking at it, smelling it, another weird one. But Magic players know the smell of a Magic card, especially when it comes to an old Magic card.
It's just like comic books. You have that comic book smell.
Exactly.
So what cards are most counterfeited today, would you say?
So today, that's a good question. So, of course, historically, it would have been the Power 9, and there's still a lot of counterfeit versions of the Power 9 and cards that were on the reserve list and everything that fits into that category. But nowadays you see a lot of popular cards that people are getting past. And I guess this kind of goes to a philosophy of like counterfeit money. People aren't counterfeiting $100 bills maybe as much. They're going for the 5s and the 10s because those can get passed off easier. So people are looking at popular cards like the Terror of the Peaks you mentioned that may only be $20, $30. No one would ever think someone would waste their time counterfeiting that card, and then they can pass it off to a lot of people. So really, the high value cards that aren't going to raise any flags are the ones that are being counterfeited more often.
The other thing is with the Power 9 and high-end cards like that, you're probably better off buying a graded version of that or one that could be graded. If there's any way for you to get it verified by another professional, get a second opinion, that's probably the best way to go about the high-end cards and avoiding counterfeits.
So you wouldn't buy on eBay then at that point because it's...
Well, so eBay just recently introduced a guarantee, and they're getting into, I think, really that TCG marketplace, but they've really released a guarantee that, if you buy through certain parameters on eBay, you will get a guaranteed authentic card, and if it's not, they'll I'm not sure the terms and conditions, but they'll help you out there. So eBay is probably still a little safer than it was, but I would still trend towards these big vendors that this is their lifeblood. They know what they're doing. One bad counterfeit can ruin their business, can ruin their reputation. So they're going to go through all the safeguards to make sure, if eBay sells a counterfeit $50,000 card, it hurts them, but they're still making billions a day. So
please don't buy your Power 9 through Facebook Marketplace or anything like that.
Yeah.
There are a lot of people buying collections on Facebook Marketplace and Craigslist and things like that. It's easy because, like the Antiques Roadshow lady, I'm sure, they don't know what they're looking at. They're like, here's a bunch of cards. I'm getting rid of them. And they might sprinkle in a Power 9 in there just to tempt you to come and look at it. But
Okay, with grading now, I'm big into the comic industry and we grade our comic books. CGC is the leader in grading in my industry. Who would you say is the leader of grading cards? Why do people get cards graded? And when you buy cards, do you prefer to buy them already graded or do you prefer to buy them raw?
For the most part, I'm buying cards to sell, to be played. I'm not really looking for a piece that's to be collected. So I'm buying most of the cards raw. In terms of leaders for grading cards, PSA and Beckett are the gold standard. CGC is definitely the third one on that list. However, they're more well known for their comic book grading. I've heard some inconsistencies about their trading card grading, but but PSA is usually the most desired in terms of resale.
Unless you're getting Power 9 graded that you're not going to play with everything, I'd rather buy a card that's not in a case because I might play with it one day, and if not, I don't need it to be graded. There's, I haven't seen, besides again Power 9 and some things, there's not a big price discrepancy between a graded card and a non-graded card that would make it worth spending money on grading, because as you know, grading's not free. You're going to spend some money, and are you going to actually get a return on investment for grading your card or not? And most of the time it's not.
Yep. You're looking to play it. You're not looking to collect it. That you did remind me though that there are certain, chase arts and Magic cards that if you do get raw, I would probably end up grading. I'm sitting on a few cards that I'm probably going to end up getting graded too. The Mono Liliana is like a big one. It had like featured Japanese artists from Final Fantasy draw one of their cards. It's hugely sought after. I never forget the opportunity to buy one in Japan and came back and the card's already like quadrupled since then. So it would have paid for my entire vacation.
Well, I do know from research, artists are a big deal for Magic the Gathering cards, like you were saying yourself. Those cards, they come out in rarity or different variants, or they reprints with different artists. How does the artist affect the value of the cards? And in comics, you could have comic cover A, B, C, and D, all the same comic, just different covers by different artists. Does that affect the value too? Does Magic even do that?
Mike mentioned, and there's this card called the Amano Liliana, and anyone who plays Magic or who collects Magic will know it. The normal version of this card is probably like $10-$20. It's not worth a lot, but this special version of this card was, again, drawn by a famous artist, Japanese artist that did Final Fantasy, and there's other famous artists that throughout the timeline that have done other IPs. For example, recently there's one that did the Castlevania series. Those are what collectors are kind of looking for, because when you have so many reprints of cards, the next level is, how can I have the fanciest version? How can I have the best version of this card? And the Amana Lily is very rare also, which adds to it. But yeah, people really go for the artist that they like. And counterpoint to that too is there are artists over the years that have become controversial, or they just kind of lost out favor. And so people don't want that version of the card because they don't want to seem like they're supporting that artist, or that they encourage whatever the artist is. In the middle, there's just, a lot of good artists. So not to count those people out, but yeah, there are artists that people will seek cards for just because they drew that card.
Yeah, and I think that for the reprint value, some cards, like I think Force of Will is a good example. Force of Will is a very expensive card on its own before it was even reprinted. There was some controversy around that artist, and so they released a new art for that card. That card's very expensive too, because the art just sort of one up the old art and sort of gave people an out, like, I don't want to necessarily support or associate with this artist. Let me buy this even better version with a non-controversial artist, right? So that's another reason that something like that wouldn't drop in value necessarily.
Well, cards that have been reprinted, there's the top 5 cards, the Force of Will, as you mentioned, Capture of Jingzhou, Mana Drain, Zodiac Dragon, and Imperial Seal. These reprints have become worth more than the originals, which is the opposite in a lot. If you're buying a book, you want the first edition. You're buying a comic book, you want the first print when it came out. But in Magic the Gathering, these reprints are actually worth more than the original. Is that because of the artist? What's the deal with the reprints being worth more than the originals?
So in addition to the art, over the years, Magic has evolved and the card frame has changed. They've done more to add to kind of prevent counterfeiting, and they've done a lot of new arts. They've done stuff where they've gotten rid of the border of cards for special cards. So now you have a borderless card, so you have the whole art on the card and just like the text box. Those versions have become more desirable. For example, also the original Force of Will was printed in a time that Magic the Gathering did not make foil cards or shiny cards, or whatever game you play or know of. That means that people want the foil versions, the shiny versions for their deck, because again, it goes back to, even if you're just playing it in a tournament, you want to have the fanciest version because you just want to have the coolest deck in the format. So people will go after those because the desire is higher.
Yeah, I think with Imperial Seal, I had to jog my memory, just think which reprint, but it's the Judge promo is expensive, and it's because it's scarce, right? So it's hit that sort of sweet spot of desirability, playability, and scarcity.
And the big thing in comics and baseball cards now is getting these items signed. Is that as popular in Magic the Gathering, where people getting the artist to sign these cards and then grade it?
Yeah, so art signatures are still popular, and a lot of these big events, so what Magic does before the pandemic, and they'll bring back, is they call them Grand Prix, but they'll have this huge tournament weekend where people can come in, and you don't have to play in the tournament, you can play in all these other events, but they'll invite artists out. And so you can go and have your artist sign your cards. So that's the easiest way for people to get their card signed. And it might be, their favorite card, and it just might be a regular card that they really like the art. The card sucked. It wasn't any good, but they really like this art. So they're going to go to the artist. And the artist will be there, and just like kind of any convention in that sense, they'll have prints and things like that. But yeah, really there's a group of people that really like getting cards signed. I was one of those people for a time, and the lines got too long at tournaments, and I was like, well, I like getting my card signed, but I don't want to wait 20, 30 minutes for this card to be signed, so I didn't do that. But yeah, that's definitely a big factor of it.
I think for the value of the card, it depends on the artist. It depends on the buyer, right? If you have a card that was signed by an artist that isn't doing signatures anymore, or it's very hard to find, or passed away, obviously, those cards usually end up being very expensive. Christopher Rush is, Magic's original artist, arguably, right? He drew Black Lotus, Lightning Bolt. Lightning Bolt's one of the most reprinted cards of all time. But if you have a Christopher Rush signed Lightning Bolt, that's going to draw a lot of eyes.
Yeah, and to add to that too, and it's kind of probably like in comic books, getting the writers to sign, or maybe the creators. Richard Garfield, who created this game, people will seek his signature, even though he never designed maybe the card that they want, but they just, he created the game. So they want to have a piece of Magic history signed by the creator. So that's another factor too. So it goes beyond the artist sometimes.
So he would be considered the Stan Lee of Marvel.
Yeah, he's definitely the Stan Lee of Marvel, and he still shows up, and he still, he, even though he's gotten out of kind of the primary part of the game, he still comes in from time to time and will provide consulting services and help design cards and things like that.
So what artists would you say are the most desirable in Magic?
Modern or old?
Both.
I think Richard Kane Ferguson is one that recently came back to do some art in the new Double Masters set. People love Richard Kane Ferguson art. I don't know if it at some point in the future it'll draw a premium on the price, but
he also, the early Magic sets, also art was not digital, so you had to paint it, you had to sketch it, you had to make it, and then they made it in the cards. A lot of the artists now, and this isn't taken away from the art of course, but they will make digital art and it looks great. But Richard Kane Ferguson was one of the old school Magic artists, and he did paint and he did in drawings and things like that. So people loved him. Christopher Rush is a big example. John Avon, he's known for doing a lot of land art. So land art, of course, is just, you're looking at like kind of that Bob Ross picturescape thing. So there's not any creatures or there's not any people in it. It's just looking at a nice little view. He's very popular. So there's definitely, there's artists that people get into because they love their art, and then they become part of the pop culture moment at the time.
And with the art becoming probably one of the most important parts of these investments going into it, with comics and certain other entities, the artist will have the original drawing versus the card that was produced. Does the original drawing ever come to the market? Is that a thing that people can complete?
all the time.
There's a website, I think, called original@magicart.com. You can kind of just Google that. And what they do is they work with these artists sometimes. But yeah, they will bring original prints, because one of the ways Magic artists now have realized is they can release their card, people are going to love it, and then they're going to sell their print, auction it, and sell it for a few thousand or maybe, 80,000 or whatever, because they can.
It's funny you say like the art that people love or like a card that they love, because there's actually a Facebook group specifically. I think all the artists have migrated toward the Facebook group to auction off their actual original oil painting, all the original prints of it. That's where they're doing a lot of the auctions, just through Facebook. It's like just a chat box. So you just bid. They'll say how long the window's open for. Even the worst of the cards I've seen draw like over $10,000 for like original, and then well into the six figures for the highly desired.
Do these guys ever go to comic conventions, or
They will be at the Magic conventions. So I've seen there's a fantasy convention called Dragon Con, and they bring in everyone from everywhere. And I've seen artists there at these conventions. They're not selling their original prints. Usually they're selling just kind of the prints and, meeting fans and stuff like that. But they do show up at a lot of these events.
how do you know if the original art is original?
So on the Facebook group, it's literally the artist holding up the print. So in the secondary market, though, you're just gonna have to get a lot of like you'll have to verify through a lot of other people. Like how much credibility does this person have? Like how do you know how they acquired it? Things like that. So it's a lot of research. But anyone with that spending that kind of money, I hope you are not just I'll take your word for it. Yeah.
Yeah. If you're moving into art collecting, then you've reached a different echelon that is outside of our realm. But I'm sure if you talk to art collectors, they can give you the whole basics of how to know things are authentic.
Well, what people don't realize, it's not just the cards, it's the art itself. So as we talk about the original art, that has a value in itself because it's a one-of-one. Versus the cards where the Black Lotus, they printed 1,100 cards, but there's one of that original that goes on. And so if you want to buy these things, you're saying the artists themselves are going on Facebook and selling them. You like the art of Magic, the best place seems like to go to Facebook, to their Facebook page. Am I correct?
It's a Facebook group called Magic Original Art, I think. And I think it's run by someone in a Discord that we're a part of. But they are very well connected with the Magic artist community very specifically. And so they'll usually reach out to him and he'll facilitate it through that Magic Facebook group.
Yeah. Let's bring up Dragon Con, because I know you go to Dragon Con quite often. They have the game rooms like every comic convention. And for art, do they sell the original art from these games in those game rooms? I mean, when you go to Dragon Con, are you able to buy Magic cards? Usually I see Pokemon and everything else, but how is Magic represented?
So outside the normal vendor halls, which always obviously have everything, there are artists there, and Todd Lockwood is another famous Magic artist, and he's also famous because I think he did a lot of Dragonlance or D&D style books. He's done a lot of covers. He's very popular. He's usually at DragonCon every year, and he is selling art. But they do get a kind of a mix of characters each year, and every year I do check it out to see who's the Magic artist that's going to be there. Do I want to bring some of my cards? They sell what are called prints. And so when you're a Magic artist, part of the thing you get after doing art for a card is Wizards of the Coast will send you X amount of copies of these cards.
The artist proof.
The artist proofs, yeah sorry. And the proofs are the exact look of the Magic card on the front, and on the back of the card is just a plain white background. So it's not legal in tournaments, it's just there to show what they did with your art and as a thank you to the artist. And then a lot of artists will go and sell these because, again, there's a premium there. People want that. They want the proofs. Some of these proofs are going to be worth less than the original cards, so people will want them for collectability, and they can get kind of a discount. And so it's a win for the artist in that sense that they'll all bring those to any conventions they go to because they get a significant amount that they can just put them in a binder and people will buy them.
At Comic Cons and different other avenues like this where people sell Pokemon games, Magic the Gathering, comic books, and other alternative investments that we go into, there's been a big thing with vendors who say they make more money selling the common cards versus these high expensive cards because the common cards tend to sell a lot more than the expensive cards. So if you were to invest in these things, in your opinion, is it better just to buy the common cards and sell them in bulk, or is it better to buy the rarer cards?
Separate this into sort of two different categories. One is if you're involved in the game, very aware, like Adam myself, buying singles or buying boxes and opening them to sell the singles. I find that yes, your margins are really made from these commons and uncommons. It's not to say that my only investment is in the commons or uncommons, but for box breakers, they're selling off the high dollar cards. They're really they're looking to at least break even on the cost of the sealed product from these high-end cards, and the rest of these cards will trickle in, and they're just icing on the top, right? That's where you're actually making, just like Pokemon cards, everything has certain odds to opening high dollar cards because of the scale a lot of these box breakers are doing it. They're able to make their money. I'm not advising anyone to go out and buy a box of Magic cards and to sell the singles and hope to and expect to make money, because odds are against you on doing that. Now, for someone who's not involved in the game, I would tell them to just buy sealed product, sit on it, and forget about it, right? If you're able to hold that money into one like tangible object, don't touch it. I sent you a message the other day where I was looking at like the New York Stock Exchange composite, right, over the last 5 years. And the reason this came was I went to my storage unit and I was picking up some things, and there were some boxes of Magic cards in there I was taking out, and I was looking up the current prices of them. They've appreciated something like 70, 80% over the past 5 years. And I was like, am I beating the stock market right now? And sure enough, it looked like I was. So, my advice is just leave it sealed. Don't look to offload it until you need the capital, right?
Yeah, just to add on to that. Yeah, safest investments are sealed products because, it's a lot easier to sell one thing than 100 of a thing. But if you have the time and you have the commitment, the commons are a great avenue, and there's a lot of people who make lots of money off of just selling the high volume, kind of the Walmart model of just like keep powering through all this stuff at a good price. But if you're looking to kind of like just get into it and you want to just dabble, sealed, buy a box that's sealed, sit on it for a few years and see what happens afterwards. Otherwise, if you play the game, or if you like the game, just buy what you like and then hold on to that, because those things usually go up too.
That's how I found out a lot of my cards went out in value. When I first got into Magic, I was just buying cards like, this seems powerful, this seems fun, I want to play with it. Didn't think about Magic as an investment at the time. And fast forward to now, I've been back in the game since like 6 years now. I'm looking at the cards I picked up, and like for $1, $2, they're like $16 now. I'm like, I have to sell this right now.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So when you buy cards from back then and where you are today, and now you're playing the game, because you guys obviously play the game all the time. It's not just investment. When you pull a card to play, are you worried that it's going to get damaged?
It's such a concern. You sleeve immediately.
Yeah. So when I was younger, I probably worried a little more. Now I'm older and, I have an income that if I bend a $20 card, I'm not losing sleep over it. There are ways to protect your cards. You put them in sleeves. So they're all sleeved up and they're protected. But yeah, there's always that concern. I do bounce around. Sometimes I have, a few $100 cards in a deck and I'm like, do I just want to take these out? Am I really enjoying it? And really the concern there is actually I'm going to accidentally leave the card somewhere or I'm going to forget it and lose it. And so I'm not as worried about damaging it myself, but I am worried about this is a $1,000 card that I'm just sitting there. It's a little piece of cardboard. I want to have fun with it, but I also don't want to forget about it or have it drop off the table and I just don't remember it until a week later and it's long gone.
So when you play, do you keep them in the sleeves and the hard cases or do you take them out? Because if you leave it in the hard cases, people know that's something special.
So the sleeves are kind of pliable. So the sleeves we're talking about is basically maybe people would know with Sellers or Dominion or any kind of those repeatable card games. They sell plastic soft sleeves that
Who's
go over
buying
the card.
sleeves for Dominion cards? That's funny. I know they sell them. That's funny.
Dominion addicts are buying sleeves for Dominion cards because they sell them and that means there's a market for them.
Yeah.
But they go in these kind of soft, pliable sleeves. So that's what we're talking about with sleeves. We don't put them in the hard cases and play with them, but they'll go in sleeves. There's even smaller sleeves so you can double sleeve so the card's extra protected.
Absolutely.
There's certain ways, but they stay in the sleeves. I won't pull them out.
Coming to the end of our podcast here, and I always ask this for every person who's investing. So we'll start with Mike. If you could only buy 5 cards, that is it. 5 cards. What do you think would be the most valuable cards in the future?
I'm going to not answer that question by saying that I wouldn't buy any cards. They're reprinting like crazy now, right? I think Wizards has gotten into the business of selling singles essentially by doing these secret layers, right? They became aware that there's a secondary market that's probably greater than our actual sales right now. So how do we get those dollars, right? So their secret layers are like I mentioned before, a series of cards that always feature reprints from Magic's history, different arts, special versions of them. I would rather just buy a sealed box of those and not worry about it. Alternatively, I would also just buy any of these collector booster boxes. That's going to run you anywhere between $200, $300, $400 for the box. But the known thing about collector booster boxes is that they are one print only. One print run of those, and they never make any more of them. Those boxes are.
So you're just buying the box.
You're just buying the box. I am
it's
just
a sealed box, though.
Yeah, a sealed box. Yeah,
you're not opening it.
I'm not opening it. Yeah.
And Adam, what would you say?
So I'll go back to, Mike mentioned this earlier, this reserve list. So the history of the reserve list is it came around in the 90s and basically got evolved over time. But essentially what it says is Wizard promised to collectors after they did a reprint set in the 90s that they would not reprint X amount of cards, no matter what. This is part of the rules. They understand that there's a collectability aspect to the game, and they don't want to destroy the value of these cards. So if you're looking at popular reserve list cards, that's what I would say. Second part is your budget, right? So if you have, $10,000 to throw around, then I would buy what, are considered dual lands. Those are popular reserve list cards. Gaia's Cradle is a popular reserve list card. If you can get into the Mox's range, then those are going to be kind of your slower risers in investment, but those will always go up because again, they're never reprinting them. And as the game grows, more people learn about these old cards and the demand increases for them. Modern cards though, I think Mike was right. Sealed collector booster boxes are good. And besides that, just, learn to play the game and then whatever you think is fun and you think might be worth something, just buy it. There's so many different versions of cards coming out right now that it's hard to keep track of what's a safe bet unless it's a sealed product or unless it's from the reserved list.
Well, I'd like to thank Mike and Adam. I hope everyone learned about Magic the Gathering. And if you have any questions, please email me or email them. I'll post some information about them in the link down below. I'll talk to you guys soon.
Hey, thank you for listening.
If you enjoyed this episode, hit subscribe and leave a review.
And we'll see you next time at Investor Coffee Shop.